All right, and we are back here on the GSMC football podcast. And for the third part of the show, we are going to now discuss the late window games from yesterday. But before that, I just want to remind you guys regarding the Patreon. So I wanted to throw up the Patreon graphic. So to get your comments recognized, donations, and tips, make sure to go to streamelements.com slash gsmcsportsnetwork./tip. Again, that really helps the show. And then for bonus coverage materials that are not covered by this broadcast, make sure to go to patreon.com and search up GSMC Sports Network. So now let's get into the late window games. And towards the end, I mean, it's hard to talk about every single game individually because we only have so much time in between with segments. So, but some of these games I'll talk about as we progress through the week because I want to talk about the Patriots and what's going on with them. The Lions, like I said, I think they are a top 3 team in the NFC. So there's a lot to unpack. Kevin Anglin just said, "I've been waiting for the show for a while." I appreciate it. I really do. You got to start watching my listening to my baseball shows too. But I appreciate the kind words there. So let's get into these games now. So we'll go through. So let's talk about the Bengals and the Cardinals first. So the Bengals obviously have been struggling. I mean, they lost 27-3 to the Titans last week, and things weren't looking good. Jamar Chase has been frustrated. Joe Burrow, of course, is dealing with his calf injury, and the Cardinals actually have been competitive this year. For my Giant fans, of course, they were killing the Giants, and the Giants, that ended up being their only win on the season, their comeback win. And obviously they did beat the Cowboys. So, as Nick Urillo said, Joe Burrow is back. Joe Burrow is back because he went 36 of 46, 317 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. Joe Mixon ran the ball for 81 yards. So he had a decent game. Could have had a touchdown, but he got stuffed at the goal line. But the big story, of course, is Jamar Chase. 15 receptions, 192 yards, and 3 touchdowns. And listen, he said in that interview, "I'm always open." And, yeah, he was open a lot. And the Bengals get a big win because, listen, I mean, it didn't look good. At one point, the Cardinals were winning this game. And then Josh Dobbs, who actually has been playing okay, he threw a horrible pick 6. And Bengals took the lead, and they never looked back. And, yeah, Josh Dobbs on the day, 166 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. James Conner had to leave the game with a knee injury. He's kind of been the focal point of their offense and also the focal point in some of my fantasy leagues. He had to leave the game. So DeMercado, he ended up being, getting more carries, 45 yards rushing and a touchdown. Marquise Brown was their leading receiver. He had a touchdown in this game as well, 61 yards receiving. So, yeah, Bengals get back to 2-3. And like I said, the Pittsburgh Steelers lead that division. But, if Joe Burrow continues to he looked like he was moving around better too. I mean, listen, I think this division is still for the Bengals to win. But we'll just have to wait and see on that. So now let's get into these other games, of course. So we got the Eagles and the Rams. Now, I thought this was going to be a tough game for the Eagles. They were losing at one point, but they were able to get the win, 23-14 over the Rams. Cooper Kupp actually made his return to the field yesterday, so that was nice to see, and he looked like he didn't lose a step. He had over 100 yards receiving. But the Eagles were the better team in this matchup. Jalen Hurts had a good game, 303 yards passing, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. He also ran the ball for 72 yards. Swift had 70 yards rushing as well, and Gainwell had 17. A.J. Brown had a very good game. So, obviously, you go back to the Tampa Bay game, and he was very frustrated with, not getting the ball. And, he's been getting the ball a lot recently. 6 receptions, 127 yards. Dallas Goedert finally had a breakout game, was waiting for that. 8 receptions, 117 yards, and a touchdown. So, yeah, the Eagles looked good. And the Rams, on the Rams side of things, they really didn't run the ball. Only 53 yards from Williams. Ronnie Rivers, he had 1 yard rushing. Matthew Stafford, 222 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Cooper Kupp, of course, was their leading receiver, 8 receptions, 118 yards, and Puka, he had a 71 yards receiving and a touchdown. So even with Cooper Kupp coming back, he was still able to have a good game and have another touchdown there. Tutu Atwell also had a touchdown as well. So, yeah, that was the final score there. Eagles and the Niners, right now, those are the top 2 teams in the NFC. I still have some concerns with the Eagles with their back end on their defense. But, listen, they still look really good. They're running the football great, and that tush-push is still working. I know some people have their complaints with that, but, I mean, listen, the Eagles have one of the best offensive lines in the league, and that's why they're able to do that. If they didn't have that, they wouldn't be doing that. So, yeah, I mean, that was another good win for them, and they're 5-0 now on the season. And like I said, them and the Niners, those are the 2 best teams in the NFC. So let's get into now. Let's go to the Jets and the Broncos because we have some Jet fans, I think, in the chat. So Zach Wilson last week had a good game against the Chiefs. This week, not so much. Passed for 199 yards, no touchdowns, and an interception, which, I mean, I thought the Broncos were going to capitalize on that and end up winning the game because of it. But Jets defense was able to hang tough, and the Broncos weren't able to cash in on that late in the game. And they fed Breece Hall. 22 carries, 177 yards, and a touchdown. He had a 72-yard touchdown run in the game. And listen, that's what he did last year. I mean, not those exact numbers, but that's how they won in Denver last year, is giving the ball to Breece Hall. And they did that again, and they ended up winning the game because of that. And Tyler Conklin was the top receiver yesterday, 67 yards receiving. But, I mean, Zach Wilson still didn't really look that good. But, listen, they relied on Breece Hall, and he ended up he was the MVP of yesterday for them. And the defense, they got that big turnover at the end, the scoop and score, tack on a touchdown there late in the game. And, Broncos are 1-4. Russell Wilson, he had 2 touchdowns, 196 yards passing. McLaughlin, who's actually been their running back, has actually been pretty good. He had a receiving touchdown in this game. Adam Troutman had a receiving touchdown in this game. Their top receiver for yesterday was Samaje Perine. Jerry Jeudy had 50 yards receiving. Perine had 73 yards receiving. McLaughlin had 68 yards rushing. Russell Wilson had 49. Perine had 22. So they ran the ball in total for 139 yards. But, yeah, I mean, that's a big win for the Jets. Broncos 1-4. And that was also, let's not forget, that was the Nathaniel Hackett game because of, the comments that Sean Payton made before the season started. How he was saying that was one of the worst coaching jobs ever, and we do things differently around here. Well, you're doing the same thing. You're losing. And, the better team won yesterday. They did. I think that right now the Broncos are one of the worst teams in football. And you know what's funny? Russell Wilson really isn't playing that bad. I mean, he had that bad turnover, but he's been okay this year. Meanwhile, the defense for the Broncos, that was supposed to be the strength of the team. And it is not looking like that at all. It is one of the worst defenses in football. Might be the worst defense in football. And guess who they play on Thursday? The Kansas City Chiefs. So we're going to talk about right now. Look at that transition. The Chiefs, 27-20 over the Minnesota Vikings. One of the things I'll complain about in this game is the turf. So you had Travis Kelce. He had to leave the game because he hurt his foot. Then you had Justin Jefferson. He hurt his hamstring running a route. Those are your 2 stars right there. And I don't know how serious the hamstring injury is with Jefferson. Kelce came back into the game and, of course, caught a touchdown. Jim Nantz said from the x-ray table to the end zone, or whatever he said when he scored the touchdown. But, yeah, I mean, Patrick Mahomes had a good game. 31 of 41, 281 yards. passing, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Isaiah Pacheco, he continues to have a good season, 55 yards rushing and a touchdown. So there's that. Travis Kelce, of course, was their leading receiver, 10 receptions for 67 yards and a touchdown. And Rashee Rice had 33 yards receiving and a touchdown. And Justin Watson had a couple of nice catches yesterday. I think it was on like a 3rd and 17, 3rd and 18. Mahomes just heaved it up to him, and he made a great play there. Obviously, there was some controversy at the end of the game. We'll get to the Vikings stats now. So Kirk Cousins, he had a good game too, 284 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Vikings really didn't run the ball, only 70 yards rushing. Alexander Mattison, he was their top rusher, 26 yards. But Jordan Addison ended up being their top receiver, 64 yards and a touchdown. And also Madison had a receiving touchdown as well. But yeah, at the end of the game, on 4th and 12, Cousins heaved it up, and they did throw the flag because they were going to call PI. Then they just picked up the flag, and also the defensive back for the Chiefs, I think it was Snead, he took his helmet off, which you're not supposed to do, so that should have been a penalty, but they didn't call that either. The pass interference call, I think, was picked up because they weren't like fighting for the ball and it was uncatchable. I think that's what a lot of people are saying. So more so, you taking your helmet off, that should have been a penalty, and they didn't call that. So now people are like, the refs have it for the Chiefs. I mean, you saw like all these pictures of Mahomes with the refs, and it's just that you hate seeing that. But there were no Taylor Swift sightings yesterday. Yeah, but the Chiefs, they get a win. They go to 4-1. Vikings 1-4. And the funny thing is, I think they were 11-0 in one-score games last year. They're 1-4 in those games now this year. So that really goes to show you, like, everything's now going wrong for the Vikings. And this was a year where, like, hey, the division's kind of wide open because Aaron Rodgers isn't there, although they did win the division last year even with Aaron Rodgers. But now it looks like it's, the Lions and the Packers for that division. And Vikings are tied with the Bears for last place. So it's a battle for last place next week. So, but yeah, I mean, not having Justin Jefferson hurts. I mean, they can't run the football. They just can't. I mean, they traded for Cam Akers. Alexander Mattison hasn't really been that effective this year. So, and the defense still isn't good. So, yeah, the Vikings have a lot of issues. And it's going to be interesting to see what they do with Kirk Cousins because, are they going to pay? Now we're back to where Kirk Cousins' contract is up, and it's like, are we going to pay him? Are we not going to pay him? And it just seems like he can never catch a break with that. I mean, he dealt with that in Washington every single year, towards the end of his career with them, and then he ended up going to the Vikings. And listen, Kirk's had a good season. It's just they're on the losing end of these games now. And the offensive line, that was a big complaint from a lot of people too yesterday. I mean, they just were not blocking for him. So, yeah, Vikings are 1-4, Chiefs 4-1. Teams that are going in different directions. But that was an exciting game though, to say the least. But yeah, so but yeah, that's pretty much it when it comes to the third part of the show, of course. So in the next part of the show, we're going to talk about the Monday night game between who I just mentioned briefly, who's in the Vikings division, the Packers, and team that's in the Chiefs division, the Raiders. And those are two teams as well that are kind of going in two different directions. So when we come back from our final break of the show, that is what we will discuss. We will preview the Monday night football game between the Packers and the Raiders. So stick around, and we will be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.